Everyone who falls in love with the stars knows that excitement that brews on the edge of a clear night. As dusk descends and the air begins to cool, we go through the final stages of preparing our equipment for the evening. But as the air begins to cool, there's something beside just whatever target we're planning to image that is hard on our minds. And that something is dew. Cool temperatures will surely bring it. And if you live in a part of the world where nights are markedly cooler than days and the humidity becomes high, the buildup of dew can be quite substantial. I can attest from our location here in Nova Scotia that I have had mornings where the dew was so heavy that it seemed as if a light rain had passed sometime in the night. And so, if you live in such an area, you often find yourself watching something like this: the temperature, the humidity, and the dew point. For smaller telescopes, such as refractors between, say, 60 and about 100 millimeters, it's not that difficult to hold back dew. As long as the telescope has a decent dew shield, and you have a dew strap near the front of the telescope, generally you're fine. But with larger telescopes, especially telescopes with very large front lenses or corrector plates and large internal volumes, such as Schmidt-Cassegrain telescopes or SCTs, dealing with dew can be a real battle. SCT telescopes, which are also my favorite kind of telescope, are particularly notorious for wanting to build up dew. And dew is one of those things where, if it manages to get on your lens or corrector plate, you could pop outside with a hairdryer and get it off, but you're going to have to do that again and again during the night. Otherwise, it's going to ruin your shooting, no matter how good the sky is. And in the morning, if there is dew on your lens or corrector plate, it's going to mean you're going to have to wait quite some time before you can shoot the morning's calibration frames. Dew, as much as clouds, is the enemy of astrophotography. As these days, I do all of my shooting with a Schmidt-Cassegrain telescope, and it's what'll be living in the observatory for a very long time. And one of these days, if it ever gets replaced, it'll just be with a larger Schmidt-Cassegrain telescope. I've had to reckon one way or another with dew for a while, and to be fully honest, dew has often been a struggle. But I've put together and implemented a 3-stage dew resistance plan, and it works pretty well. And for those of you with bigger telescopes, I thought I would share it with you. You might find it useful, especially if you live in a dew-prone area. So what I have on the SCT is 3 stages of dew resistance. The first is the big black item on the right third of this image. It occupies probably about 35% of the entire telescope's length, including the image terrain, and it's almost as long as the optical tube itself. I'll just put a red circle around it here to mark it. This is an aluminum dew shield, and it's made by Celestron. There are other makers of dew shields out there. Some, I understand, even have heaters built in or woven into them, the ones that are made of fabric. But I really like this one, and one of the reasons is, once it's on the OTA, it's almost as rigid as the OTA itself, and it snaps into place perfectly onto the OTA, so it fits almost like just an extension of the body. This means it's not inclined to slide around over the telescope during the night, which would destabilize the telescope and alter its balance on the mount. It also means that every time a little breeze passes through, which is quite frequent here in the Maritimes of Canada, where we live literally stuck out into the ocean, that the night breezes won't cause the dew shield to wobble around. And yet, for all of that, I can easily take the dew shield off. All I have to do is put a little pressure on the clips on either side, and it comes right off. By and large, I don't ever take it off though, just if I have to upgrade something, and maybe for the annual cleaning of the corrector plate. There are also slots in the dew shield to allow for a smooth connection to the dew ring that I have mounted inside on the corrector plate. Let's jump to that, because that's stage 2 of the dew protection system. There is a lip around the outside of the optical tube assembly that is used to hold the corrector plates in place. The lip is also pre-fitted to accept the dew heater ring. The dew ring attaches directly to the lip with just a few screws, and it's quite easy to attach. I seem to recall it took maybe 15 or 20 minutes to put it on. You can see that is one dusty corrector plate in there. That's pollen. It's the pollen time of the year, and pollen always gets on everything. I'll clean that off in a couple of weeks after the pollen and spore season are mostly over. I know it looks like a mess, but it doesn't really make any difference when shooting DSOs. And pollen is always a little tricky to clean off. It's sticky, so you need a mountain of cotton balls, good strong alcohol, and a bunch of Kim wipes. And you have to be very careful to lift the pollen off so it doesn't scratch the corrector plate. I live on an old farmstead deep in the Canadian backwoods, and farmsteads and backwoods are both by nature pretty pollen prone, pretty spore prone, and very dust prone. So dealing with these things, that's just daily life for me. So anyway, the dew ring is stage 2 of the dew resistance plan. Now, many persons that own SCTs remarked that they were seeing artifacts in their stars, in particular when they activated the dew ring. Nobody's quite sure why. Was it the heat? Did it misshape the corrector plate a little bit? Nobody was really quite certain, but I got them too. And then I got the idea that maybe if the heat from the dew ring was causing a very slight, microscopic really, expansion of the corrector plate, then maybe if I heated the OTA body itself, I could make room for the expansion and reduce those artifacts, and at the same time, add another step of dew resistance. And so, I bought a Kendrick dew strap, shown here. Dew straps can be fragile, and I wanted something tough. I live in rugged country, with rugged weather that can be hard on equipment. I wanted something that would last. So I did a lot of reading on various forums and read over a lot of reviews for quite a few different dew straps. The one that everybody really seemed to universally like was the Kendrick dew straps. So that was the one that I decided to go with. You know that saying, buy it right, buy it once? Well, I believe in that saying, and typically that's what I aim to do. So anyway, the Kendrick strap forms stage 3 of the dew resistance plan. It provides a little heat to the OTA just behind the corrector plate. And as you can see, it provides it directly to the body of the optical tube assembly, the OTA. Now, of course, the dew shield is passive. It doesn't require any power. It does its job on its own. It shields the corrector plate, and it helps minimize the movements of air directly around the corrector plate and slows it down anyway. And all of that helps to resist dew, and it's a huge help. Based on research others have done, you might say that the dew shield, all by itself, fights 2/3 of the battle against dew. But the other 2 stages are electrically powered, and they need a power source. After doing a fair bit of research, I settled on the Pegasus Astro Pocket Power Box, right here. And I have to say, I'm really impressed by this little gadget. It provides 10 amps of power at 12 volts, and all by itself, I'm sure could power the entire astrophotography rig. The camera, the focuser, the filter wheel, the mount, and the 2 heaters. However, so I don't overtax it, I only have it connected to the 2 heaters, the dew ring and the Kendrick dew strap, and one of the 12-volt outputs is connected to the camera, and through the camera also the filter wheel. That can use a total of 6.7 of its possible 10 amps of output. But I wanted to do things that way because the Pocket Power Box provides really smooth power. I measured it on an O-scope, and the power is excellent, and I know that cameras can be especially sensitive to fluctuations in power, so providing power through the power box should improve the camera performance. The dew straps go to the 2 male RCA connections on the left, and the camera plugs into one of the 12-volt ports on the right. Now, one of the reasons that I got the Pegasus Astro Power Box is because it monitors temperature and humidity, and will use that information to provide just the right amount of power to the dew strap and the dew ring. I can also remotely observe its measurements of temperature, humidity, and dew point, as well as control how it operates and how aggressively it applies power to the dew strap and dew ring from the lab inside the house. Because the software that it comes with is excellent. It was easy to install on Microsoft Windows. It only took a moment. Pretty much configured itself and was pretty much instantly ready to go over the Wi-Fi Ethernet connection that I have to the observatory. I can remotely control whether power is applied to the 4 12-volt power outlets or the 3 to 12-volt variable power outlet. I can manually control the amperage to the dew rings, or I can set the device to automatically control the amperage to the dew rings, but set how aggressively the software addresses dew. And I can monitor the temperature, humidity, and dew point, as well as the power output and total power applied from the digital indicators on the right, or I can use the graph to monitor them in the next tab over. It's very handy, and the hardware itself, I have to say, is extremely effective because, in the end, the system worked out exactly as I hoped it would. This is an image of Pickering's triangle that I shot last night. This is only 4 hours of integration time. The summer nights are very short right now in Canada. We are almost at the shortest day of the year, and when that happens, the night's going to be about, I think, 5.5 hours long. And as far as shooting astrophotography, when you count focus routines, dithering routines, right routines and such, that can eat up an hour through the night easily. And then when you consider aggressive calling of information, that can eat up another 30 to 60 minutes worth of integration time. But last night I was able to get 4 hours, my first 4 hours on this target. And over the next few days, I hope to get another 8. I'm looking for 12, maybe 15, 16 hours of total integration time. Also, it was very warm and humid last night with the humidity around 95, 96% when I went to sleep. And I would imagine it probably got higher. It usually hits at this time of the year 98 to 99% sometime during the night. And as you can see, the stars are nice and round with little in the way of notorious ring artifacts. And when I went out to the observatory at the crack of dawn to collect the information, well, the proof is in the pudding, as they say. No dew. None whatsoever. And this has been the case consistently ever since I created this 3-stage anti-dew system. With the dew shield, I used to start getting some dew build up toward maybe 4 a.m. or an hour or so before dawn. When I added the dew ring, the system could mostly resist dew up until right about the break of dawn, but with the rapid temperature change at that time, it would overwhelm the system and there would still be dew on the corrector plate. But when I added the Kendrick heater strap, as well as the Pegasus Astro power box to the system, which carefully controls the power that's applied to the system, dew became a thing of the past. Since putting the system on the SCT, I've had many nights of 98 to 99% humidity, with the temperature sitting at the dew point for half the night or more, and never so much as a drop of dew on the corrector plate. So that's it, my simple 3-stage, straightforward anti-dew system. Probably not such a big deal for persons using smaller refractors, smaller telescopes, even persons with Newtonians, because your mirror is sitting way back in the body of the telescope. But for those of us using SCTs and other designs with a corrector plate right up at the front of the telescope, or a very large refractor, if you're having trouble with dew, you might want to give something like this a try. For me, it's worked like magic. So I have this mounted on a Celestron 203mm or 8-inch Schmidt-Cassegrain telescope. And the parts again are a Kendrick dew strap, a Celestron dew ring, and the Celestron aluminum dew shield. And the entire thing is controlled with the Pegasus Astro pocket power box. I have to admit, it was a little pricey, but no more dew. And to me that's important because clear, dark hours are precious. Too precious to lose them to dew sitting on a lens or corrector plate. Well, thank you for watching as always. And if you have any thoughts, observations, or questions, please leave them in the comments below. And now, have a blast doing astrophotography and get out there and shoot that sky.